Now, today we'll talk about OPEC, but from again the perspective of the impact of shale gas, shale evolution on the OPEC. Okay. Shale evolution on Russian energy strategy. That's the other big topic. Shale evolution on Middle Eastern energy strategy. That's another big topic. So this is one of these two big topics today due to shale evolution. A very good article, very good chapter, again, written by two big scholars in this field. Amy, who is the author? Amy Myers-Jeffy and Ed Morse. Two big names in this field, really, really big name. Amy is now at the University of California at some campus. Used to be at Rice University, James Baker Institute of Public Policy. Edward Morse used to be, I think, with the State Department. He's currently leading research team at Citibank. Yeah. He recently published a very interesting report, which is available online. So, very good article. The topic for today is, the OPEC as an oil cartel, right? It's not a gas cartel. It's an oil cartel. OPEC is about oil. It's not about natural gas. Okay. So the question here is, with shale revolution impacting the globe, the entire globe, is the OPEC going to continue as a cartel, or facing some serious challenges, or even the demise of the entire organization? That's the central question. Again, same question can be asked about Russia, right? Russia is hit probably the hardest by the shale revolution, but in terms of natural gas, right? In terms of natural gas. Russia exports both oil and gas, right? But probably most people expect that OPEC will be hit harder than Russia in terms of oil, right? Then Russia will be hit harder than the OPEC in terms of natural gas, right? So OPEC, what's going to happen to the OPEC due to shale revolution? A lot of speculations. There are different opinions again on this issue, but probably they are going to provide standard opinions on this. They're a little bit pessimistic, right, about the sustainability of the oil cartel. There are reasons according to them. Let's see what are the major challenges for the OPEC. The most successful, right up to the shale revolution, OPEC was the most successful commodity cartel. Commodity cartel meaning there could be different cartels of different commodities. Natural gas, we didn't have it, right? Unlike oil, we didn't have a cartel of natural gas. The only thing we have about natural gas is gas exporting nations, GECF, right? Gas exporting countries forum, which was assembled by Russia, 2002. That's the only one very recent, organization. But OPEC, it's been almost half a century. Also, there are, different cartels of different commodities. There must be some organizations of, copper, coal, right, or even rice, coffee, right? But all these different commodity cartels were powerless against advanced countries, right? But the question he's asking, I mean, they are asking is how, on the earth this cartel, such as OPEC, could survive, right, in the middle of all these Western pressures, globalization challenges, right, market reforms, right? They as a cartel, they get around all these challenges. Probably the only cartel doing that, right? So this is a puzzle, right, for many people. OPEC, huge impact on the global oil industry in the 60s. Since its foundation, it has reshaped the entire oil industry. So OPEC is the oil industry itself, right? Without OPEC, the oil industry is unthinkable. So OPEC is the oil industry, right? So oil industry is divided between the OPEC one hand and the major Western major companies on the other, right? But the power balance is skewed toward probably OPEC, right? OPEC is not powerless. OPEC is very powerful, even vis-a-vis Western major corporations. So there must be some secrets behind this OPEC success, right? And OPEC's power, right? So we want to understand what are those powers behind OPEC, whether that is maintained even after shale revolution. This is an anomaly in the global economy, puzzle, right? OPEC poses a very interesting puzzle in the global economy. This is a puzzle. Remarkable endurance. Whether this endurance can continue, right? Some suspicions, but at least up until the shale revolution, great, endurance. And because of this, I think the OPEC, one of the OPEC is impacting the Middle Eastern and oil exporting countries is that probably this is the downside. Downside to OPEC success is sort of a curse facing the Middle Eastern and OPEC countries. Behind this OPEC success, dictatorship is there, right? Dictatorship, which is called resource curse, right? It is a success, but that comes with a lot of, problems from development perspective, right? So the demise of OPEC, failure of OPEC due to shale revolution might be a good news from this perspective, from domestic development perspective. So the central question of this chapter is, can OPEC's endurance continue in the new shale era, natural gas era, right? Right. We are entering the natural gas age, right? In the natural gas age, OPEC as an oil cartel, right? Their fate, right, poses a lot of questions. Right, the entire environment is changing very rapidly, dramatically, right? There are many challenges, not only challenges posed by shale itself, but there are many other challenges. So the environment facing the OPEC is changing dramatically, and its cohesiveness as a unity, as a cartel. The unity and cohesiveness and effectiveness is in crisis. Cartel has power when they have this, right? Without this, cartel is not cartel, right? Cartel is cartel because they can put together members in one direction, move all the members in one direction. That's cartel, right? That's cohesiveness, unity, right? OPEC, 12 members, right? So far, OPEC was successful because all these different OPEC members look at one direction. Despite all the internal problems, some semblance of cohesiveness was there so far. But this is in crisis today. So might be no longer effective or no longer unified. Like I said, one of the problems is democracies in OPEC members and reform movements in OPEC members, right? And this poses a lot of challenges for oil exporting, oil production strategies for OPEC members, right? Democracy means, from the government perspective, from the ruler perspective, from the leader perspective, democracy, meaning that people demand more freedom. Normatively, it's a good thing, but this means for the leaders, for OPEC members, means more money, right? More money should be spent on people. That's what it means, right? Which means less money can be spent on oil extraction, right? That's what it means. So democracy is a huge challenge for oil exporting countries. Like I said, cartel, their goal is to control oil prices. That's cartel's goal, control oil prices. But due to many challenges, it might be difficult to control global oil prices as a cartel. A little bit of history, because this is important, right? Go back a little bit, look at when it was formed, how it was formed, how it evolved. This is critical. OPEC was founded 1960, okay, 1960. But before 1960, because oil industry began in the very beginning of 20th century, 1908 in Persia. That's how oil development, contemporary oil development began. So between 1908, 1959, the global oil industry was controlled by multinational oil companies. Okay? For about 50 years, global oil industry was regulated by Western oil majors. Okay? They control supply, production amount, price. This is key. Right? How much will be produced, for how much it will be exported. These are the two key issues. Who decided? Global oil, Western oil majors decided. Okay? How much will be produced, for how much it will be exported. So that was the situation before OPEC was founded. And this is important. The type of agreements between Western majors and host government, meaning Middle Eastern governments. The type of agreements at that time called concessionary agreements. Okay, concessionary agreements. In other words, the governments sort of allow major oil corporations come in and develop on behalf of the host government. Okay, and they take all the benefits, profits. Western oil corporations, they take all major portions of profits they take and leave something for the host government. Concessionary, hugely, unequal type of agreements, concessionary agreements. Okay. So only royalties, okay, left to host governments. And this is also very unequal on unequal terms. Now, so these 5 countries try to change this, okay, change this unequal relationship. So these are the founding members of OPEC: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi, Venezuela. Founding members formed OPEC. The issue at that time was to open U.S. market. That was the issue. Okay? That was the issue. Because the U.S. government tried to set up barriers to imports from the Middle Eastern countries, setting up quota at that time. So the issue for these 5 countries at that time was to reduce U.S. quota for Middle Eastern oil imports. But all this practice for oil development was problematic, right? Concessionary agreements and unequal relationship, these are all issues, including U.S. quota issue. Revenue sharing, right? They want more revenue, want more profits. Host government must have more profits. And they want to raise prices. Okay? OPEC members, they want to bring up the prices. So this indicates that Western oil majors, they try to suppress oil prices, global oil prices. And OPEC members try to bring up the prices, right? So they have different goals. Western governments and major corporations, low prices. OPEC members, high prices, right? These are different goals. Now, then we get to the 70s. 70s is defined by the energy crisis. Okay, meaning that OPEC pushing much harder this time than boycotting exports to Western countries, right? Simply stop exporting. That's the energy crisis. 73, first wave, second wave, 79. And they nationalized oil fields. OPEC members nationalized oil fields. And they tried to change concessionary agreements. And they claimed sovereignty over natural resources. And oil becomes a weapon, right? Oil becomes a weapon. And power is devolved to NOC rather than major oil corporations. So NOC emerge as opposed to majors, right? NOCs in host nations, Middle Eastern countries, they began to set up their own national oil corporations, NOCs. Then energy crisis in the 1970s. Energy crisis, oil prices, shot up, 4 times, even 10 times, right? Oil price fluctuations. It's more important to remember, what happens after the energy crisis. Energy crisis ends with the collapse of oil prices in 1984. So since 1984, here 1985 actually, 1985, 1999, what describes the global oil industry this time? 73, 79, energy crisis, right? I'm sorry, 73, 84, energy crisis, the period of energy crisis, 73, 84, okay? Energy crisis period. High oil prices, power moving to OPEC, Middle Eastern countries, right? Oil prices are high, and national oil corporations having power rather than major corporations, right? And Saudi Arabia and all these Middle Eastern countries becoming rich. They become wealthy countries. Wealth, riches move to OPEC countries, Middle Eastern countries, right? And global economy recession, right? That's what happened between 73, 84. So the period of energy crisis. And this period ends with the collapse of oil prices in 84, right? Then this new period begins. New period of low oil prices begins. I'm not sure how good they are in terms of describing and sort of separating these different periods. Low oil price period, 85, 1998. Okay? What happened in this period? And sort of a transition from energy crisis period to this low oil price period. The Soviet Union collapse. Right? This we had a conference on Friday, and this was, again, was one of the hotly debated issues. Due to shale revolution, right? Russia is losing power. Okay, so the authors of this chapter argue that 2009 was a turning point. Right? Post 2009 is a new period. Okay, in which maybe there are many changes, but in which Russia loses power over European countries. Okay, Russia no longer wields natural gas as a weapon in this new period after 2009. OPEC might lose power again, which is contained in this chapter. OPEC, Middle Eastern countries, they might lose power in this new period after 2009. Then oil prices might go down, right? So sort of a new cycle of period is being settled now. And this one may be similar to post-2009 period. It's kind of interesting to compare the Soviet Union at that time. Many argue that Russia, Gazprom might collapse. Okay, like the Soviet Union collapsed at that time. Low oil prices and social crisis in Middle Eastern countries, right? Due to dwindling incomes, right? and global economic boom instead. So this period is characterized by these changes. Like fall of oil prices in 1984, right? Because of this, the Soviet Union began to have few incomes. The incomes dramatically reduced. That's what Gorbachev saw at the time, right? So Soviet crisis was a crisis of oil export revenue, reduced. That's the real crisis for the Soviet Union at the time. And America, the United States today, is doing the same thing. Try to do the same thing against Putin. It's a very dangerous situation for Russia, in my opinion. Gazprom is losing a lot of money. But the only hope for Gazprom is, if you look at the structure of Russian income today, 40% of the Russian income comes from energy exports, okay? 40%. And within the 40%, 20% comes from natural gas. This is unknown to many people. Only 20% comes from natural gas. 80% comes from oil exports. So what does this mean? This means even if the United States puts pressure on Putin by cutting all these natural gas networks surrounding Russia, Russian income reduction might not be that big because natural gas income only 20%. So Gazprom is in a crisis, but to get around this crisis, the Russian government might increase oil exports. Then getting this money from oil exports, they can still, sustain Gazprom. So what does this mean? This means that the real weak point for Russia is when oil prices come down. Today's oil prices, it's still high, $110. But without shale gas and natural gas, oil prices today might have been much higher than this, like $150 or even $200, right? And over time, I think oil prices might go down further. Again, this will pose a lot of problems for Russia because America is moving from natural gas production to oil production, shale oil production, right? America can export, as you can find out from this book, shale oil, unconventional oil, right? That will sort of draw down oil price levels. So some comparison. 84, again, the energy crisis subsides, then oil prices fell, and behind oil price fell was Saudi and America. Saudi Arabia, they sort of cooperated, okay, to bring down the price. And the Soviet Union was hit hardest by this. Collapse of Soviet Union, that was the main reason. And exactly the opposite thing happened, right? In the 70s, OPEC countries, they nationalized oil fields. But this time, this period, they privatized oil fields, right? They try to host foreign investment into their oil fields, oil development. Okay, why? Because prices are low. Okay, oil prices are low, so that to get the same revenue, they have to produce more. To produce more, they need foreign investment, right? So they had to privatize oil fields. Same goes for Russia, right? Russia privatized the oil industry. low oil prices. Oil prices began to go down. And because of this situation, oil-producing countries, okay, began to suffer budget deficits and social crisis. Iran-Iraqi war, 10 years of Iran-Iraqi war happened at that time, 1980 to 1990, 10 years of Iran-Iraqi war, right? So a lot of social turmoil, right, throughout the Middle Eastern area. On the other hand, Western nations, advanced countries, they enjoyed low oil prices, and the global economy was prospering, booming. The U.S. economy, best period, best time. And you know, that's when, in the 1990s, that's when you know, the 4x4, you know, the trucks, the big, you know, family cars, that was very popular at that time, which is called gas guzzler. These big U.S. cars, very popular at that time because prices were low. Oil prices were low.
Even right now.
Right? And the U.S. stock market, the best time. A lot of Americans made a lot of money at that time. Under Clinton, the U.S. economy was best time. But if you look at the other side, Middle Eastern countries, worst period for them, right? Even Saudi Arabia began to have budget deficits for the first time this period, right? So very good years for Western countries, bad years for the OPEC countries. OPEC was divided, right? There were a lot of internal struggles within the OPEC, right? The debate within the OPEC, this author is concerned about after 2009, OPEC will be divided, right? There will be internal divisions. Mostly internal divisions within the OPEC is over production quota, right? Production quota and pricing level, right? Same thing. OPEC members internally divided over prices and quota, production quota, right? Some countries want to have higher prices, I mean within the OPEC, others lower or mid-level prices, right? Depending on countries. And some argue for maximum production, right? Other members argue minimum production. So OPEC members have different goals, right? Do you know what countries within the OPEC argue for a maximum production, larger quota, right? Or who argues for higher prices? This is important because what does the OPEC want? This is a very interesting question. What does the OPEC want? There is no correct answer for that. Different OPEC members have different goals, right? Like, for instance, there are 12 OPEC members, right? This is a good topic for paper. Again, 12 different members of OPEC, but mostly big countries, right? Population size big and poor, right? Economically poor. Those countries, their goal is maximum production. Maximum production, larger quota, right? It's common sense, right? They want to produce more. But on the other hand, smaller countries, okay, relatively wealthy countries, their goal is not maximum production, like a minimum sustainable production level. That's their goal. And pricing strategy also not aggressive, Okay, pricing. You know, those sort of a maximum production quota countries, their pricing strategy, they don't care about prices. Right? They want to sell more for lower prices. Right? But Saudi, these smaller wealthy countries, Saudi, Qatar, Oman, UAE, these countries, they have a much longer time horizon, right? So that they don't have to produce more at the moment, but they look at it from longer time period, right? Because maximum production will immediately lead to price fall, right? They know that. So these smaller countries, wealthy OPEC countries, they are relatively mild about pricing, okay, and production. So OPEC as a cartel is having had difficult time in terms of unifying these different goals of different members. So there are price hawks and price doves, right? So this is a problem facing OPEC. Now, 1998, another change, another turning point. These authors say a new era began 1998. New era of high oil prices. Right? Oil prices began to go up beginning 1998. And they don't explain why 1998, right? And this high oil prices maintained until 2008. Right? 2008, global financial crisis. It ended with global financial crisis. Right? Then 2009, a new era began due to shale revolution. And this new era will be of probably low oil prices. We don't know yet, but probably low oil prices. Right? So this is a cycle, about 10-year cycle, 10 to 15-year cycle. Right? Now, why oil prices began to rise in 1998? Can anyone answer this? Can anyone explain why a new era began 1998 and maintained until 2008? Actually ended with the global economic crisis. This new era of high oil prices ended with the global financial crisis. But what happened between these 10 years? For 10 years, high oil price period. A lot of things happened in these 10 years. What happened? And first, why high oil prices? Why oil prices began to rise at that time, beginning in 1998? Right? Unfriendly leaders, sort of in OPEC and Latin America and also Africa, right? And also Africa, Nigeria. So African producers, they also had new leaders who happened to be sort of unfriendly to America, right? Sort of there was an alliance of leftist, non-Western, anti-Western leaders here and there, Africa, Latin America. How about Putin? Putin, officially elected 2000. Putin. And Yeltsin, old man, sort of stay in power even late 1999, right? But it was evident at that time already, 1999, Putin was the successor to Yeltsin. So same goes for Russia, right? Putin was a former CIA, the KGB, agent. Obviously, he's anti-American, nationalistic. This is important. Nationalistic. These leaders are nationalistic. They claim sovereignty for their own natural resources. They don't like Western majors, right? Western majors, controlling their natural resources. So this is interesting because 1999, there was an alliance of these anti-American, leftist, nationalistic leaders throughout the world, right? Iran, same thing. Iran, Iraq, same. Probably the center of anti-Americanism was in Iran and Iraq. And Iran, Iraq, Hussein, and Iranian leader, they often, made comments about, we are going to, trade oil, not based on dollars but based on euro, or some different currencies, which is very sort of scandalous remarks, right? That angered Americans. So the oil sort of politics was changing in a way that sort of there's an alliance of anti-Americanism. In other words, in this period, okay, like a privatization, low oil prices, Western powers, right? These sort of angered a lot of non-Western countries, particularly those African, Latin American, Russian. They suffered a lot under this system, okay? And political changes began to appear this time, right? So that we have nationalist leaders here and there, including Putin, Chavez, right? And these new leaders, what they did was to first, okay, limit supplies. What they did first, okay, these new leaders began to decrease exports. That's their strategy. Began to limit production, began to limit exports, and they aim higher prices. Different strategy. And limit privatization. Stop privatization. Right? Nationalize oil fields. And they are revenue maximizers. Okay? They favor short-term revenues. Okay? And they reduce investment also. This is what happened, particularly in the OPEC, Middle Eastern countries. They no longer invest in oil fields, oil production facilities, Middle Eastern countries. And this leads to low investment and low output policy leads to spare production capacity decrease. I think this is a good point. In other words, OPEC's power, more than anything else, OPEC's power is based on spare capacity. Spare capacity. What spare capacity means is that OPEC always have some remaining exporting capacity, like a 2 to 3 million barrel. they hide it from the market, so that when oil prices go up too much, right, they can put these remaining capacity onto the market so that prices go down. This is spare capacity. And this made real OPEC power. Okay? But throughout this period, due to this OPEC spare capacity is dramatically reduced. So that OPEC's market power, right, also reduced. And agreement, no longer concessions, based on concessions. It's production sharing. Okay, production sharing. So-called PSA. PSA type of agreement is more of the norm. Okay. Production sharing is when you produce oil, okay, you split the oil. 5 goes to the host government, 5 goes to Western majors. It's not royalty based. The production simply split. Okay, much profitable for the host government. But on the other hand, this is a paradox. This chapter discusses how much money flows into OPEC countries in this period, right? So many OPEC countries, they became wealthier in this period. And some statistics, different numbers, but as of 2012, as of late 2000s, $1 trillion flowed into OPEC countries. $1 trillion. Okay, a lot of money flowed into OPEC countries, and these are windfall profits, windfall incomes, and these windfall profits, okay, windfall profits prevent political and economic development. This is a paradox. There's a huge amount of money flowing into OPEC countries, but on the other hand, this is counterproductive for system development, political development. Okay, so more money, but more dictatorship, and more money, but long-term development becomes much more distant. Long-term economic development, right? So resource curse becoming even worse under this period. Russian power. You see, Putin and Russia in general was very powerful at that time, right? But same question. I mean, in terms of, Russia became much more powerful, but in terms of Russian democracy and Russian economy, whether or not these high oil prices, helping Russia develop or preventing Russia develop, that's a huge question for Russia. Middle Eastern countries, same. Okay. Now, very interesting period beginning 2009. Right. New period begins 2009. One of the legacies of sort of high oil prices was that Western major corporations, they look outside the OPEC for investment. So most of the investment was made outside the OPEC throughout the high oil prices, which is a bad news for OPEC. And there was a search for alternative energy development. Right? Due to high oil prices, people were searching for alternative energy such as natural gas or renewable energy, and unconventional energy, including shale gas, shale oil, tight oil, right? Things like that. And this becomes a basis for shale revolution later. And oil consumption fell. In general, oil consumption fell. And this leads to the drop in oil OPEC influence. On the other hand, one of the big trends, global trends, is the growth, oil demand growth in OPEC countries. Internal demand from OPEC is growing, right? Because economies are growing. Right? Economies are growing, and the reason for energy demand growth in OPEC is their internal systems. Like oil prices are much cheaper in OPEC countries, oil producing countries. Since energy prices are cheaper, they sort of abuse energy so that consumption grows much more quickly than other countries, right? So subsidy, because energy subsidies, oil demand growth is much higher in the OPEC countries. There are 5 major challenges are discussed in this book. Future challenges, right? Which OPEC countries will be facing in the future. Number 1 challenge is rising demand, internal demand, right? Rising internal demand. This is something OPEC countries that have to struggle with, rising internal demand. Because OPEC countries are fastest, there's fastest oil consumption in the world, right? Energy consumption growth is the greatest in the world. This means, again, from the government perspective, this means higher spending. They need to spend more on society, right, rather than oil exploration. And because of higher subsidies, energy price is cheaper here. So OPEC countries, they need to change this, right? They need to change. But the problem is, if they get rid of oil and gas subsidies internally, that directly connects to their political support, right? This is not something that can easily done. 3 reasons they point to: the economic expansion and population growth and subsidies. These are 3 reasons for rising oil demand, right? Population growth is also phenomenal. So everything comes down to this controversy, right? The OPEC's share of oil exports in the future. How much OPEC can export oil in the future. Peak time was 2007. OPEC portion was 24 million barrels per day, 60%, about 60% of the world market. But since then, dropping year by year. And second issue is governance issue. Again, governance issue means how to, like I said, internal divisions, how they can bridge these internal gaps among members so that they maintain the unity of the cartel. That's governance issue. But this governance issue will be difficult because, again, fiscal problem, budgetary problem is becoming even bigger for every OPEC member because break-even oil prices are rising. In other words, cost of production is going up in general, right? So this makes difficult for every member to agree on cut production, right? This is a difficult thing to achieve, right? Even Saudi, right? Even Qatar, these are sort of very peaceful countries and mild countries in terms of energy strategy. But even for them, right, in the future, it's difficult because there are budgetary challenges. Production costs going up, right? So even these mild countries becoming aggressive under this situation. These are governance issues. And countries are internally facing more democratic society, right? And this poses governance problems. And these authors keep on talking about Iraq. Iraqi, country coming back as a member, right? As a normal member. This will raise some governance issue, right? Because Iraq, for many years, sort of a dormant producer, right? But when Iraq comes back as a producer, they will become a very aggressive member, right? So they will ask for higher quota, right? Maximum production. So this will pose governance problems, according to Amy and Ed Morse. Iraq will be insisting on higher production. This will pose governance issue from the OPEC perspective. Makes sense. Makes sense. Again, third issue will be Iraq's reintegration. Same thing. Okay, when Iraq is reintegrated, that itself sort of becomes a challenge. In other words, the additional production from Iraq will be quite significant. Right? Additional production from Iraq will be quite significant. So unless and otherwise, global demand growth, is strong, right? There will be oversupply because of Iraq. That's the question they are raising, right? There is a oversupply potential because of Iraq's reintegration. Because Iraq was handicapped for many years, went through 3 wars, right? So peak production time was 1980, but since then, for 2 decades, 3 decades, Iraq was simply dormant, right? but now is the time for Iraq to produce much more, right? So people from Iraq, they hate, right, the quota idea that is imposed from the OPEC central government. And this will become a serious challenge to OPEC's unity in the future, potentially. And this is Iraqi problem, right? Then Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabian role. Saudi Arabian role is changing, right? Saudi Arabian role used to be, I think there was one sentence that was erased here. What describes, what characterizes Saudi, the traditional role of Saudi within the OPEC? Swing producer, right? Swing producer. Swing producer. In other words, swing producer is possible because they have spare capacity, right? Spare capacity, right? That's the biggest role for Saudi traditionally. That swing producer role might decrease dramatically due to less spare capacity, right? That's the biggest change from Saudi. And the reason Saudi has a lot of internal problems. Okay, the reason being Saudi has a lot of internal challenges and regional challenges. Right? Because of this, Saudi might not be able to play swing producer role. Right? That's the biggest change. In other words, the fall in oil prices 1984, right, which America was engineering at that time so that the Soviet Union collapsed, that was possible because of Saudi Arabia. Saudi, as a swing producer, dumped 2 or 3 million barrels of oil overnight onto the market. The oil prices simply plummet. But this might not be possible in the future because Saudi almost losing that function, that ability as a swing producer because of internal challenges. Right? Saudi has a lot of internal challenges. So that this policing mechanism, Saudi was sort of policing the OPEC, okay, as a neutral player. And Saudi is losing that role. Okay, the biggest challenge, according to this chapter, is this. The biggest one is this, unconventional challenge. Challenge of unconventional oil and gas, this is the biggest of all. The biggest of all. And we sort of went into some details of this already, right? So these unconventional challenges, sort of OPEC's market dominance. Because North America becomes an exporter itself. Right. There are 4 important new sources of supply. There are 4 important new sources. First, biofuel. Second, oil sands. Third, deep water production, offshore deep water production, and tight oil. These are 4 new sources. Okay. Tight oil is shale oil, right? And the amount, biofuel, America itself 1 million barrel. Okay, America 1 million, outside America 1 million. So biofuel 2 million. Oil sands, Venezuela, Canada. Okay, Venezuela, Canada. 3.7 million barrel per day. And deep water offshore development, offshore sort of happened before shale revolution. Okay, offshore was something that was prospering in the 1990s. Okay, but according to this author, offshore development will continue. And shale oil. And this section, right, this section goes into some details, right? The details of these, unconventional development. You might want to read the remaining pages. So according to them, what we can expect from all these changes is that, number one, U.S. import from the Middle East will decrease no matter what, right? But instead, China will be importing a lot of oil still from this region. Okay, I think that's pretty much what we can do today. We have about 5 minutes. If you have questions, go ahead and ask me. And probably after quiz, we'll get into based on this, like Russia, what will happen to Russia, Russian energy power, the impact of shale on Russian energy power in Europe and in Asia. That's what we will do after the quiz. Okay.